You ever have an itch that you just have to scratch? I don't know, it's just when I see something that just plain doesn't agree with me, and it just makes absolutely no sense what they're saying, I feel like I have to say something about it. And specifically what I'm talking about here is this notion that the street triple is not a sport bike. Okay, well, the insurance companies don't seem to agree with that gentleman's assessment. Just because this bike, in terms of insurance category, is cataloged as a naked sport bike. It's a Daytona. It's a naked Daytona. It doesn't have bearings. It's got the same. It's got the identical frame geometry as the Daytona.
Oh yeah.
The motor is virtually identical, with the exception of some very key elements or components of how the engine is set up.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't make it any less of a sport bike. It just means that it's basically a sport bike that's been configured for a different type of riding.
Yeah.
Or a different type of riding road situation. What I mean by that is, just because this has risers on it as opposed to clip-ons, and because the motor is detuned or slightly detuned, it still has over 100 horsepower.
Yeah.
It still has around 50 foot-pounds of torque, which is right there. I mean, if you took sport bikes, let's say super sports from 4 to 6 years ago, I mean, they had the same, almost identical specs. I mean, if a bike is geared differently and it has the horsepower and the torque that's right there, I mean, certainly I think this bike would be capable of a few more miles per hour than what it's currently doing stock, which is like right around 100, let's say like right around 140 miles an hour, I think, top speed.
Did you?
Well, because it doesn't do 165 like the Daytona. Does that mean that it's less of a sport bike? No, it just means that it's been a sport bike that's kind of missing the full module.
Oh yeah.
It is still cataloged as a sport bike.
I mean, and suffice to say, right off the line or out of corners, particularly in these tight technical roads, this street triple will waltz all over a lot of the 600 super sports.
Yeah.
On some of the smaller and the tight technical roads, absolutely it will. It's because it has the way the engine mapping is configured most of your grunt and your power is coming in from the bottom and in through the mid-range.
Yeah.
It still pulls up on top as well, but it doesn't have as high a red line as the Daytona. It's I think the Daytona is like 14.5 to 15 stand.
Always in a hurry.
1,000, depending on how the guy has the bike set up. It's a sport bike. It's a street fighter. I mean, street fighter is basically a sport bike that has been set up for the street. That's what it is. But it's still the DNA of the sport bike is all there. The motor, the frame geometry, the suspension, it's all sport. the tires even, for Pete's sakes. Now when you want to talk about a street bike,
We seen some bikes turning in this.
when I think of a street bike, I think of things like the Honda NC, you know, the NC 500, the NC 700. I think of bikes like, you know, the Suzuki TU250X, or the new Yamaha, what is it, that new Yamaha 400 thumper thing, the Honda CB 1000. That's a street bike. Or even, let's say, you know, okay, for argument's sake, you could just say like the Kawasaki Z1000, because that frame is just indicative of that is an entity unto itself. It's not a repackaged ZX10 sport bike. But it's set up every bit like a sport bike, yes. Or even the KTM 1290 Super Dude. Not intended as a sport bike, not set up as a sport bike. Or the, let's say you want to talk about street bikes, and then you talk about bikes like, what do you call it? The MT-07, the Yamaha MT-07 FC-07, or the MT-09 or FC-09. You want to talk about those bikes. Those are street bikes. They were never intended to, they were never set up as sport bikes. This bike was. This bike is a sport bike. It's a naked sport bike.
Yeah.
Through and through. It was never, the idea that it's a naked sport bike now is more or less an afterthought of what the Daytona was, or a kind of an evolution, basically. And even if you want to argue, the Speed Triple was basically started off as a sport bike. It started off as the 955 Daytona, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the Speed Triple is a naked sport bike, however which way you want to slice it. Yep.
Sir, hey, it's nice meeting you.
This video is a production of Zone Television Media. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can find us on Feed, Twitter, and Google+. Also, be sure to visit us at zonetelevision.com.